The first thing Bel Santos noticed was that Julian Hart was no longer wearing his wedding ring. Not that she had been looking for it. At least, that was what she told herself as she pulled her gray Honda to the curb outside the San Francisco courthouse and watched the CEO of Lattice Care come down the stone steps alone. No driver, no attorney beside him, no assistant carrying a folder, no photographer waiting for a statement. Just Julian, 41 years old, founder and CEO of a healthcare company valued at more than $2 billion. The man who could walk into a room full of investors and make them stop checking their phones. And right now, he looked like someone who had forgotten what he was supposed to do next. Belle reached across the passenger seat and pushed the door open. "Get in." Julian stopped beside the car. He looked at her, then at the Honda. "You brought your own car? You told me not to send company transportation. I assumed you'd use a car service. You also told me nobody should know where you were." A faint smile appeared. It disappeared almost immediately. "Fair." He got in. Belle pulled away from the curb before either of them could say anything else. For 3 blocks, the only sound inside the car was the turn signal. Then Julian loosened his tie. "It's done." Belle kept her eyes on the road. "I figured." 7 years reduced to 11 signatures. She glanced at him. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like the 7 years didn't count because the last part happened in a courtroom." Julian stared through the windshield. "That sounds like something my therapist would say." "Then your therapist is very wise." "My therapist charges $500 an hour." Belle nodded. "Then I'm underbilling you." That got a real laugh. Small, tired, but real. For a moment, Julian looked like the man she had known before Lattice Care became a company people wrote magazine profiles about. Then Belle's phone rang through the car speakers. "Nina Patel, General Counsel." Belle looked at Julian. He closed his eyes. "Take it," Belle answered. "Nina, where are you? Driving?" "With him?" Julian leaned toward the microphone. "I'm alive, Nina." "Good. Stay that way for the next 90 minutes. Belle's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "What happened?" "The board meeting was moved up." Belle looked at the dashboard clock. "It's scheduled for 4. It's scheduled for 2:30 now." "Who changed it?" "Grant." Belle's jaw tightened. "Grant Voss, chairman of the board. Former private equity executive. One of Lattice Care's earliest investors. And the only person in the company who could make the sentence, 'I'm only thinking about shareholder value,' sound like a threat." Julian sat straighter. "Why?" Nina hesitated. That was enough to make Belle nervous. "There's a formal acquisition proposal." Julian turned toward Belle. "From who?" "Titanbridge Health." Belle almost missed the next light. Titanbridge had tried to buy Lattice Care twice. Both times, Julian had refused. Titanbridge did not build healthcare companies. It bought them, mortgaged them, cut expenses, sold what remained. Julian's voice changed. The exhausted man who had just walked out of divorce court disappeared. The CEO returned. "How much?" $3.1 billion. Julian said nothing. Belle did. "That's too high." Nina paused. "Yes." Belle looked at Julian. He was already looking at her. Titanbridge was offering almost 40% above the company's current market value. Nobody paid that kind of premium without knowing something other people didn't. Nina continued. "Grant wants a vote today." "He can't force one," Julian said. "He may be able to." Silence. Then Nina said the sentence that changed the entire afternoon. "Rachel's shares transferred into the settlement trust this morning." Julian went completely still. Belle knew enough about the divorce negotiations to understand the problem. Rachel Hart had helped Julian start Lattice Care. She was not just his former wife. She was a founding shareholder. For years, Rachel's voting shares had prevented any outside coalition from overpowering Julian, but the divorce settlement required those shares to enter a temporary trust before their final distribution. 30 days. During those 30 days, the trustee could vote according to a narrow financial mandate, not according to Julian, not according to Rachel, according to what could be justified as maximizing financial value. And Titanbridge had just offered $3.1 billion. Belle felt the pieces connect. They timed it. Julian turned toward her. Belle continued. They waited for the settlement. Nina answered quietly. That's what I think. Julian looked out the window. 20 minutes ago, he had ended his marriage. Now someone was using the paperwork from that ending to take his company. Belle made a hard right. Julian looked up. The office is the other direction. We're not going to the office. Belle, you haven't eaten. He stared at her. Did you miss the part about the hostile acquisition? No. Did you miss the part where you've been in court since 8 this morning? I'm not hungry. You're never hungry when you're upset. I'm not upset. Belle gave him a look. Julian sighed. Fine. I'm experiencing a calm and measured collapse. Better. She pulled into a small Filipino bakery in South San Francisco. Julian looked at the sign. Seriously? My mother says no life-changing decision should happen on an empty stomach. Your mother also thinks I'm too thin. My mother thinks everybody is too thin. Belle parked. I need 10 minutes. We have a board trying to sell my company, and you need blood sugar. He opened his mouth. Belle pointed at him. 10 minutes. Julian stared at her for another second. Then he opened the car door. Yes, Mom. Inside, Belle ordered 2 chicken empanadas, coffee for herself, and bottled water for Julian. He stood near the window, tie loose, suit jacket folded over his arm. Nobody recognized him. Or if they did, nobody cared. An older Filipino man was reading a newspaper near the door. 2 nurses in scrubs were sharing a plate of pancit. A mother was trying to convince a little boy that he could not have 3 pieces of oob cake before lunch. Julian watched them. Belle handed him the water. You look strange. I'm standing in a bakery. You've stood in bakeries before. Not 20 minutes after getting divorced. Belle's expression softened. Are you okay? He looked at the bottle in his hand. No. It was the first honest answer he had given all day. Belle leaned against the counter beside him. Julian spoke quietly. Rachel and I knew this was coming for almost a year. We were separated for 8 months. We negotiated everything. Property, shares, the house. He swallowed. I thought knowing the ending in advance would make the ending easier. It doesn't. You sound very certain. Belle looked down at her coffee. I've had practice. Julian glanced at her. Belle almost regretted saying it. Her own marriage had ended 4 years earlier. No courtroom drama. No headlines. No billion-dollar company caught in the middle. Just a husband who had gradually become a stranger and a woman who had spent so much energy keeping everyone else comfortable that she had not noticed how unhappy she was. Julian knew the basic facts. He had never pushed for more. The employee in Belle returned first. We should focus on the board. Julian nodded, but neither of them moved. Then he said, Do you remember Seattle? Belle looked at him. Which part? The offer. She knew exactly which offer he meant. 11 years earlier, before Lattice Care had a real office, before Julian had investors, before Belle had married Daniel Santos. Julian had asked her to leave a hospital administration job in California and join him in Seattle. At the time, LatticeCare had been 6 people, 3 laptops, and a software platform that crashed whenever more than 80 users logged in. Belle had said no. Daniel had just proposed. Her father's health was getting worse. Her mother needed help. Moving to Seattle had felt irresponsible. 3 years later, after her father died and Julian moved the company headquarters back to California, Belle joined LatticeCare. By then, Julian was married to Rachel. Belle was married to Daniel. Whatever possibility had once existed between them had become something neither of them named. Julian looked at her now. "When I asked you to come with me, you thought I was offering you a job. You were offering me a job." "I was." He looked down, but not only a job. Belle stopped breathing for a second. The bakery sounds seemed to move farther away. "Julian, I'm not saying this because of what happened today." "Then, why are you saying it today?" "Because I spent 7 years inside a marriage where both of us kept pretending the things we didn't say weren't important." Belle stared at him. Julian continued, "I loved Rachel, I did. She deserved more of me than I gave her." His voice remained steady. "But I'm tired of confusing silence with integrity." Belle could hear her own heartbeat. "What are you telling me?" He looked directly at her. "That, 11 years ago, I wanted you to come to Seattle because you were the only person I could imagine building that life with." Belle's lips parted. "You never said that." "No, you said you needed someone who understood hospital operations." "I did. You sent me a compensation spreadsheet." Julian almost smiled. "I was 29. You were an idiot." "Yes." Belle stared at him. Something old and carefully buried moved through her chest. She thought of Daniel. She thought of the apartment they had rented. The wedding. The years spent trying to make a good decision become a happy one. She thought of Julian, calling her after her father died, and sitting silently on the phone because he knew there was nothing useful to say. She thought of the first week she joined LatticeCare, when he gave her an office 2 doors from his and never once mentioned Seattle. She thought of 7 years of choosing appropriate distances. Then, before she could stop herself, Belle asked the question, "Why didn't I choose you?" Julian's face changed. Not triumph, not relief, pain. That was worse. Belle looked away. "I shouldn't have said that." "No, I'm sorry. Belle, I don't even know what I mean." "I do." She looked at him again. Julian's voice was quiet. "You mean you're looking backward from the worst day of my personal life and wondering whether a different decision 11 years ago would have saved both of us some pain." Belle said nothing. "And maybe it would have," he continued. "Maybe it wouldn't." He stepped closer, but not close enough to touch her. "But I'm not going to let divorce court turn you into my answer." Belle felt something inside her fall. Not because he had rejected her, because he had understood her too well. Julian continued, "And I'm not going to become yours." For several seconds, Belle could not speak. Then the woman behind the counter called her number. Belle turned. "Our food." Julian exhaled slowly. Perfect timing. Belle collected the bag. When they reached the car, neither mentioned the conversation again. But everything had changed. The question had been answered. There had been something between them. Something real. Something they had both missed. And instead of making their lives simpler, knowing the truth made the next decision much harder. Because now Belle had to sit beside him in a boardroom and pretend that she had not just asked her newly divorced CEO, why she had married someone else. 28 minutes later, Belle entered Latticecare headquarters with Julian walking beside her. The office felt wrong. People were pretending to work. Belle could always tell. Too many monitors were open to the same spreadsheet. Too many people looked away when Julian passed. News traveled quickly inside companies. Bad news traveled faster. Nina met them outside the executive conference room. She was 47, sharp-eyed, composed, and one of the few people at Latticecare who never seemed impressed by Julian. She handed Belle a folder. Titan Bridge proposal. Belle opened it while walking. 3.1 billion. Cash. Expedited closing. Management restructuring after acquisition. She stopped. What does operational consolidation mean? Nina looked at her. What it always means. Belle's stomach tightened. Job cuts. Julian kept walking. How many? They don't say. Belle flipped another page. Carebridge Operations is listed separately. That made her stop again. Carebridge was not just another division. It was the part of Latticecare. Belle had spent 6 years building. Latticecare's technology connected hospitals with home care providers. After patients were discharged, Carebridge was the human side of that system. Regional coordinators, language support teams, caregiver networks, community partnerships. The work was expensive, difficult, hard to scale. It was also the reason thousands of elderly patients actually received the care the software promised them. Grant Voss had complained about Carebridge for years. Too labor-intensive, too low margin, too human. Belle looked at Nina. They're planning to separate it. Nina's eyes confirmed it. Julian finally stopped. What? Belle handed him the document. Page 43. A sentence buried beneath acquisition language. Titan Bridge reserved the right to divest non-core service operations within 12 months. Julian read it twice. Grant knows what that means. Yes, Belle said. Carebridge would be sold or closed. Nearly 1,800 employees and contracted care coordinators would be affected. Many of them worked in communities where English was not the first language. Belle had built those teams after watching her own mother struggle to coordinate her father's medical care, not because her mother was incapable. Because the system expected exhausted families to understand insurance language, medication schedules, discharge instructions, and specialist referrals at exactly the moment they were least able to think clearly. Carebridge existed because Belle knew what happened when nobody helped translate a system into human terms. Julian looked at her. This isn't only about control. No, they want the network, and they don't want the people who run it. The conference room doors opened. Grant Voss stood inside. 62, silver hair, perfect suit, perfect posture. He looked first at Julian, then at Belle. Glad you could join us. Belle disliked him more every time he sounded polite. Julian walked in. We're not voting. Grant smiled. That isn't solely your decision anymore. Around the table sat 8 directors. Some looked uncomfortable. 2 would almost certainly support Julian. 2 usually followed Grant. The others would follow whichever argument looked safest. A screen displayed Titan Bridge's offer. Grant gestured toward the empty chair at the head of the table. Julian remained standing. Why today? Grant folded his hands. The offer expires Friday. You received it when? This morning. Nina spoke. Timesment says 6:12. Grant looked at her. Yes. Belle watched him. 6:12, hours before the divorce hearing ended. Before Rachel's shares entered the settlement trust. Someone at Titan Bridge had known exactly when the legal transfer would occur. Belle wrote the time on her notepad. Grant continued, "The board has a fiduciary responsibility to consider an offer of this magnitude." "Consider," Julian said, "not approve in 90 minutes. Nobody said approve. You moved the meeting. I accelerated a discussion." Julian looked around the table. Without management analysis, without integration review, without employee impact projections. Grant leaned back. The market does not wait for emotional convenience. The insult was subtle, but everybody heard it. Divorce court, emotional CEO, unstable founder. Belle saw Julian's jaw tighten. Grant had chosen his moment carefully. Not just because Rachel's shares were temporarily outside Julian's control. Because Julian looked vulnerable. Belle spoke. "Then the market can wait long enough for us to page 43. Grant looked at her. "This is a board discussion, Miss Santos." "I'm aware. You're here as chief of staff. I'm here because CareBridge is material to the acquisition. CareBridge represents less than 9% of revenue and 34% of successful post-discharge retention." One director looked up. Grant's expression changed slightly. Belle continued, "If Titanbridge removes CareBridge, hospital contract renewal risk changes." Grant waved one hand. "That can be modeled. Then model it before voting." Silence. Julian looked at Belle. Not with gratitude, with recognition. She knew that look. It was the same look he had given her years earlier when she found a flaw in LatticeCare's first national hospital contract. The room had assumed she was defending her division. She was not. She was defending the business from a decision made without enough information. Grant closed the folder in front of him. "Fine." He looked at the other directors. 48 hours. Julian shook his head. 1 week, 48 hours, 5 business days. Grant smiled. 3. He knew Julian needed the board. Julian knew it too. 3. Grant stood. "Then we reconvene Monday at 9. The meeting ended. People left quietly. Grant remained. As Belle gathered her papers, he said, "Mrs. Santos." She looked up. Grant smiled. "I admire loyalty." That sounded like there was another sentence coming. "There is." He walked closer. "Be careful. It doesn't become a substitute for judgment." Belle held his gaze. "My judgment is why we're not voting today." Grant's smile disappeared. "Monday." He walked out. Julian waited until the door closed. Then he looked at Belle. That was reckless. Belle stared at him. "Excuse me? You challenged the board chair. You were about to lose the vote." "I know. So I changed the question. You made yourself a target." Belle laughed once. "That part isn't new." Julian lowered his voice. "Belle, no what? You don't get to do this." "Do what?" "Tell me. This morning that you once wanted me. Spend lunch explaining that neither of us should use the other as an answer, and then 5 minutes later decide you need to protect me from Grant Voss." Julian froze. Nina quietly picked up her folder. "I suddenly have somewhere else to be." She left. Julian rubbed his forehead. "You're right. I know. I meant professionally." "So did I." Belle closed the acquisition folder. "I am not defending you because you got divorced." "I know. I'm defending CareBridge." "I know. And if protecting this company means telling you you're wrong, I'll do that too." Julian's expression softened. "That's why I asked you to Seattle." Belle pointed toward the door. "Do not make this worse." A small smile appeared. "Understood." Belle spent the next 6 hours inside contracts. Not memories, not old choices. Contracts. At 7:30, most of the executive floor had emptied. At 8:15, Julian appeared beside her desk with 2 bowls of soup. Belle did not look up. If that came from the executive dining room, I'm not hungry. It came from your bakery. She looked at him. You drove back? I sent someone. You told someone where we went? Belle, I don't think the bakery is part of the divorce confidentiality order. She took the soup. Thank you. He sat in the chair across from her. For 10 minutes they ate without speaking. Then Julian said, Rachel didn't destroy our marriage. Belle looked up. I didn't say she did. I know. He stared at the soup. I did. Belle waited, Julian continued. Not by cheating, not by screaming, nothing dramatic. He gave a tired laugh. I made everything else urgent. The company, investors, expansion, problems. He looked at her. Rachel became the person I loved when I had time. Belle's expression changed. Julian nodded. I know how bad that sounds. It sounds honest. She asked me for years to be somewhere before there was a crisis. Belle understood that sentence immediately. Her mother had once said something similar about Belle. You always arrive when somebody is drowning, Anak, but you disappear when they only want your company. Julian leaned back. When we separated, I blamed the company. And now? Now I think the company was just the place I hid. From what? He considered the question. Being needed is easier than being known. Belle stopped moving. Julian looked at her. People thank you for solving problems. Yes. They don't always thank you for having needs of your own. Belle looked down. That sounded suspiciously personal. It was. She did not answer. Julian stood. I'll let you work. At the door he stopped. And Belle? Yes? Whatever happened 11 years ago, I'm glad you built the life you built. She looked at him. Even the bad parts? Especially those. Why? Because I don't want the woman standing here now to exist only as evidence that we should have made different choices. Then he left. Belle sat alone for a long time. The next morning, she drove to Daly City before work. Her mother opened the front door wearing slippers and holding a watering can. Why are you here? Good morning to you too. Good morning. Why are you here? Belle stepped inside. Lorna Santos had been in America for 38 years and still believed unexpected weekday visits meant one of three things. Somebody was sick, somebody was fired, or somebody was getting married. Belle followed her into the kitchen. Can I have coffee? You have coffee at your office. Mama. Lorna stopped. She looked at her daughter carefully. What happened? Belle sat at the table. My boss got divorced yesterday. Lorna waited. And? I picked him up from court. Another pause. And? Belle frowned. You're enjoying this. I'm waiting for the actual story. Belle rubbed both hands over her face. He told me that when he asked me to move to Seattle 11 years ago, he wanted more than an employee. Lorna slowly put the watering can on the counter. Oh. Belle stared at the table, and I asked him why I didn't choose him. Lorna sat down. You said this yesterday? Yes. On the day he got divorced? Yes. Lorna closed her eyes. Isabella, I know, even I know that is bad timing. I know. What did he say? That neither of us should turn the other person into an answer because we regret things. Lorna opened her eyes. Belle waited for criticism. Instead, her mother nodded. Smart man. Belle frowned. That's not helpful. You want me to say he should have kissed you outside the courthouse? No. Good. Because then I would say you both need therapy. Belle laughed despite herself. Lorna reached across the table. Do you love him? Belle looked away. I don't know. You have worked beside him 8 years. That doesn't mean anything. It means you should know whether you love him. No. It means I know how he handles contract negotiations, investor calls, and food poisoning. Food poisoning? Singapore. Long story. Lorna studied her. Your father and I were married 31 years. Belle smiled faintly. I remember. I loved him. I know. I was also angry with him for maybe 11 of those years. Belle laughed. Lorna smiled. Love is not magic, Anak. Her expression became serious. But I know one thing about you. What? You choose people who need you. Belle went still. Lorna continued. Your father got sick. You stayed. Mama, I needed help. You stayed. He was my father, yes. Daniel was struggling after losing his job. You married him. Belle's voice became defensive. I love Daniel. I know. Lorna squeezed her hand. That is why this is not criticism. Belle said nothing. Lorna continued. You are good at being necessary. The words landed harder than Belle expected. Is that bad? No. Her mother shook her head, but maybe you should ask yourself something. Belle looked at her. Yesterday you asked, why didn't I choose Julian? Lorna leaned closer. Maybe the better question is, when have you ever chosen something only because you wanted it? Belle did not have an answer. At work, the Titan Bridge review continued. Belle built 3 models. One assumed Carebridge remained intact. One assumed partial consolidation. One assumed closure. The third model destroyed the acquisition premium within 18 months. But assumptions were not enough. She needed proof. Friday afternoon, Belle called Marcus Reed, Lattice Care's head of hospital partnerships. What happens if Titan Bridge closes Carebridge? Half our clients revolt. I need something stronger than revolt. 3 of our largest hospital systems have service continuity requirements. Belle sat straighter. What kind? Community coordination minimums. We promised multilingual discharge support and local care navigation. Change of control? Marcus paused. I don't remember. Find out. 20 minutes later, he called back. Belle. His tone had changed. Yes, you were right. Her pulse quickened. How many? 4 contracts. Revenue, $186 million annually. Belle stood. And if service levels drop, they can terminate within 60 days. There it was. Not a miracle. Not a hidden document appearing at the perfect moment. A consequence buried inside contracts Belle already knew existed because she had helped negotiate the service standards. Titan Bridge's offer assumed those hospital contracts remained stable after acquisition. If Carebridge disappeared, they might not. Belle grabbed the acquisition memo and found Titan Bridge's revenue projections. They had modeled less than 3% customer attrition. The real exposure could be 5 times that. She went directly to Julian's office. He was on a video call. Belle held up 4 fingers. Julian saw her expression. He ended the call. What? 4 hospital contracts. She placed the documents in front of him. Change of control, service protections. Julian read quickly. His expression sharpened. How did Titan Bridge miss this? They didn't necessarily miss it. He looked up. Belle continued. They may expect to renegotiate after the acquisition. With what leverage? Ownership. Julian frowned. Belle pointed to another clause. But Grant's board memo assumes those contracts are secure. Julian sat back. So either Titan Bridge didn't tell Grant, or Grant didn't tell us. The room went quiet. Julian looked toward the window. We need proof. Yes. Not suspicion. Yes, and you're enjoying telling me this. A little. He smiled. Then Belle's phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. A link. Belle opened it. Her stomach dropped. An industry gossip site. Headline. Lattice Care CEO. close relationship with Femodal Ecutive raise questions after divorce. Below it was a photograph. Belle and Julian leaving the bakery, taken the day of the divorce hearing. Another image showed Belle picking him up outside court. The story described her as Julian's longtime confidant. It mentioned her own divorce. It mentioned late nights at headquarters. And then it asked whether their relationship had contributed to the end of Julian's marriage. Belle felt cold. Julian saw her face. What? She handed him the phone. He read the article. His expression hardened. None of this is true. I know. Rachel knows. The internet doesn't. Julian stood. We respond now. Belle took the phone back. No. He stared at her. No? If you respond angry, it becomes bigger. They're accusing you of... I know what they're accusing me of. Julian's face tightened. I'm calling communications. Julian, this affects your reputation. Yes. And I'm not letting you take the hit because someone is trying to weaken me before a board vote. Belle looked at him. Listen to what you just said. He stopped. She continued, You're making it about protecting me. Because you didn't do anything. Exactly. Belle stepped closer, so don't rescue me. His jaw tightened. I'm not rescuing you. You're about 30 seconds away from using every resource in this company to prove I'm innocent. Yes. Because you care about me? He said nothing. Belle held his gaze. Or because you need me? That stopped him. The question was unfair. She knew it, but it was also necessary. Julian slowly sat down. Belle took a breath. We need facts. He nodded once. Okay. Nina handles the company response. Okay. Nothing personal from you. He clearly hated that. Okay. And I'm stepping out of the acquisition review. His head snapped up. No. Yes. Absolutely not. Now it looks like I have a personal interest in keeping you in control. You have a professional interest. Public perception matters. So Grant wins? Belle stared at him. You think Grant leaked it? Don't you? Yes, then why reward him? Because if our analysis is right, it survives without me. Julian looked furious. Belle understood why. For years, he had trusted her because she was the person who stayed when problems became ugly. Now she was walking away at the exact moment he needed her. That was why she had to do it. Belle took her notebook from the desk. Marcus has the contract analysis. Nina has everything else. Belle. She stopped at the door. Julian's voice dropped. I don't care what they say about me. I know. I care what they do to you. Belle looked back. That's why you have to let me decide what protecting myself looks like. He said nothing. Belle left. The article reached her family before dinner. Of course it did. Her younger brother Carlo called first. Do I need to punch somebody? No, are you sure? You're a middle school science teacher. I contain multitudes. Belle laughed. I'm fine. Then her aunt called. Then a cousin in Sacramento. Then her mother. Belle answered. Mama, did you sleep with him? Belle nearly dropped the phone. What? I am asking once so I know which kind of angry I should be. No before the divorce? No after? Mama. Okay. Good. Belle covered her face. Lorna continued. Then why are you hiding at home? I'm not hiding. You are talking to me from your apartment at 6:30 on a Friday. Belle looked around. Her mother had a point. What should I do? Go dancing? Yes. Belle laughed. I'm serious. Mama, you did nothing wrong. I know, do you? Belle went quiet. Lorna's voice softened. You have spent your whole life believing being good means making sure nobody can criticize you. Belle swallowed. People at work are reading that article. Yes, they think you cannot control what everybody thinks. I'm an executive. You are also a person. Belle walked toward the window. Across the street, somebody was carrying groceries. A couple walked a dog. Normal life. Her mother continued, "You want advice?" "Not really. I'm giving it anyway." Belle smiled. "Of course. Do not decide whether you love that man while everyone is watching." Belle stopped. "And do not decide you don't love him just to prove them wrong." That one stayed with her. Saturday morning, Rachel Hart called. Belle almost did not answer. Then she did. "Rachel." "Hi, Belle." Rachel's voice sounded calm. Too calm. Belle had known her for years. She liked Rachel. That made everything more complicated. "I assume you saw the article." "Yes, I'm sorry." Belle closed her eyes. "You have nothing to apologize for. I do if someone is using my divorce to hurt you." Belle sat down. "Rachel, nothing happened." "I know." Belle said nothing. Rachel continued, "Do you know why I know? Because you trust Julian?" Rachel gave a small, sad laugh. "No." The answer surprised Belle. "I know because I watched him around you for 8 years." Belle stopped breathing. Rachel continued, "And I watched you around him. Rachel, you never crossed a line?" "No." "I know." Belle looked at the floor. Rachel's voice remained steady. "That doesn't mean there wasn't a line." Belle had no response. Rachel continued, "I'm not angry with you. You should be." "Why?" "Because yesterday he told me." Belle stopped. Rachel waited. "What?" Belle rubbed her forehead. "Nothing." "Belle, he told me he had feelings for me before he met you." Silence. Then Rachel said, "Seattle?" Belle stared at the phone. "You knew." "I suspected." "How?" "He kept the original employee offer." Belle almost laughed. "Of course he did. He keeps everything. That is deeply disturbing." Rachel laughed softly. For the first time, the conversation felt human instead of impossible. Then Rachel became serious. "Belle, Julian and I failed for reasons that belonged to Julian and me." Belle closed her eyes. "You do not have to carry my marriage because somebody wrote your name beside it." "Thank you. But I'm going to tell you something you may not like." Belle waited. Julian loves being needed. Belle opened her eyes. Rachel continued, "It makes him feel useful, safe, in control." Belle thought of the bakery. Being needed is easier than being known. He knows. Knowing isn't changing. No, if you ever choose him, don't choose the man who needs you to keep his company together. Rachel's voice softened. Make sure he learns how to be the man who can stand beside you when you don't need him at all. Belle swallowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I loved him." Rachel paused. "And because I'm done confusing love with ownership." On Monday morning, Belle did not attend the board meeting. That was the hardest thing she had done in years. She sat 2 floors below with the operations team, while Marcus presented the CareBridge contract analysis upstairs. At 9:23, Nina texted, "They're listening." At 9:41, Grant disputes termination exposure. At 10:12, Titan Bridge revised assumption confirmed. Belle stared at the message. "Confirmed?" She called Nina. "What does that mean?" Nina answered quietly. "Titan Bridge sent Grant a revised model 3 days ago." Belle stood. "What model?" "One that assumes 40% of CareBridge operations are sold within 12 months. Belle's stomach dropped. Did the board receive it? No. There was the proof. Grant had received material information about the acquisition and failed to distribute it to the board. Who found it? Rachel. Belle froze. Rachel. The trust received a disclosure packet because her shares are involved. Grant apparently forgot. The trustee had to copy her counsel. Belle closed her eyes. The opposition had not lost because a miracle appeared. Grant had created the evidence himself. Nina continued. There's more. What? Titan Bridge offered him a seat on the combined company board. Bell sat down. Compensation? $400,000 annually plus equity. Bell exhaled. Conflict of interest. Material. Undisclosed. Enough to destroy Grant's credibility. But then Nina said, Julian wants to remove him immediately. Bell stood again. No. I thought you'd say that. He'll make it personal. Yes. Tell him independent counsel first, then recusal, then investigation. He's not going to like it. I don't care. A pause. Then Nina laughed. I missed you upstairs. 30 minutes later, Julian came down himself. Bell was standing at a whiteboard with 3 regional operations managers when the glass door opened. Everyone stopped. Julian looked at them. Can I borrow Bell? Bell crossed her arms. For how long? 5 minutes. She followed him into an empty office. He shut the door. You told Nina not to let me remove Grant. Yes. He concealed material information. Yes. He has an undisclosed financial conflict. Yes. And your solution is to let him stay chairman. My solution is to follow the process you would demand if you weren't furious. Julian stared at her. I am furious. I know. He used my divorce. I know. He attacked you. Yes. And you want restraint. I want accountability that survives lawyers. Julian looked away. Bell continued, if you remove him yourself 10 minutes after discovering the conflict, he'll say this is retaliation by an unstable founder trying to block a premium offer. Julian looked back at her. You don't think I'm unstable? No, but you think they'll say it. They already are, he exhaled. So independent counsel, yes. Temporary recusal, yes. Special committee, yes. And then we bury him. Bell gave him a look, professionally, obviously. She almost smiled. Then Julian became serious. Rachel called me. Bell's stomach tightened. She called me too. I know. Bell waited. Julian's eyes stayed on hers. She said she was going to make a public statement that there was no affair. Bell looked surprised. I didn't ask her. I know. Did you? No. He took a breath. I asked her not to. Bell stared at him. Why? Because she shouldn't have to defend my reputation after spending years cleaning up the emotional consequences of my choices. Bell said nothing. Julian continued. She said she wasn't defending me. A small smile touched Bell's face. That sounds like Rachel. She said she was defending you. Bell looked down. Julian continued. I told her thank you. There was something different in his voice. No ownership, no attempt to control the outcome, just acceptance. Bell looked at him again. That was the right thing. I'm learning. Slowly, painfully, someone knocked on the glass. Nina opened the door. Special committee approved. Julian nodded. And the acquisition? Delayed pending conflict review. Bell exhaled. Nina continued. Grant is recused. For the first time in 4 days, Julian looked relieved. Then Nina said, but Titan Bridge hasn't withdrawn. The problem had changed. It had not disappeared. Over the next 2 weeks, Latticecare did something it should have done before any acquisition discussion. It asked what the company was worth beyond the number on the offer. Bell returned to the review after outside counsel cleared her. She interviewed hospital executives, regional managers, care coordinators, patients, families. She did not ask whether they loved Latticecare. She asked what would break if CareBridge disappeared. The answers were specific. A Vietnamese-speaking caregiver coordinator in San Jose explained how elderly patients stopped answering unfamiliar English phone calls. A Mexican-American nurse in Phoenix described families who could manage home medication only after a coordinators who could normally separate from evening pills, physically separated morning pills from evening pills. A Filipino-American daughter in Daly City told Belle that CareBridge had helped her mother recover after surgery because somebody finally explained the discharge plan in Tagalog. Belle listened. That one stayed with her. Not because the woman was Filipino, because Belle remembered her own mother sitting at the kitchen table 20 years earlier with 6 prescription bottles and a discharge packet she was too embarrassed to admit she did not fully understand. Lorna had eventually understood it. She always did. But she should not have had to struggle alone. That memory had helped Belle build CareBridge. Now, it helped her understand something else. She had spent years believing her value came from being the person who could handle what everybody else found difficult. Maybe the greater achievement was building something that meant fewer people had to be that person alone. The special committee rejected Titanbridge's original valuation model. Grant resigned from the board before the conflict investigation ended. He denied wrongdoing. The company disclosed the investigation publicly. No dramatic arrest, no confession, no security guards escorting him from the building, just consequences. His board seat disappeared. His reputation changed. Titanbridge lowered its offer after factoring in the CareBridge contracts. The new number was no longer irresistible. The board voted against the acquisition. LatticeCare remained independent. People congratulated Julian. Business reporters called it a founder victory. Belle hated that description. So did Julian. At the next company that he stood in front of more than 1,000 employees while thousands more watched remotely. He could have taken the victory. Instead, he put Marcus's contract analysis on the screen. Then he put Belle's CareBridge retention model beside it. This company was not saved because I refused to sell it, he said. Belle stood at the back of the room. It was saved because people inside this company understood what we actually built better than the people trying to price it. He looked toward Belle. Not too long, not in a way that turned her into gossip again, just enough. Then he continued. And we made one mistake I don't intend to repeat. The slide changed. A new organizational structure appeared. CareBridge would become its own operating unit, not a cost center, not a support function, a core business. And the president position was empty. Everyone around Belle began looking at her. Belle looked at Julian. Her stomach dropped. After the meeting, she marched into his office. No. Julian looked up. I haven't asked anything yet. You put an empty president box on a screen in front of 12,000 employees. 11,800. Julian. He stood. The board approved the structure without asking me? The structure. Not you. Belle crossed her arms. So now you're going to offer me the job? Yes, no. He blinked. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need the terms. Belle, I'm leaving. The room went silent. Julian's expression changed. What? I'm leaving LatticeCare. He stared at her. Why? Belle had practiced the answer. It still hurt to say. Because I finally know what I want. Julian looked as if she had struck him. The CareBridge presidency is yours if you want it. I know. You built it. I know. You'd have full operating authority. I know. Then why leave? Belle looked at him. Because if I stay, I'm still choosing the place that needs me most. Julian stopped. She continued. I love this company. Her voice almost broke. I love what we built. Then stay. No, Julian moved around the desk. Belle raised one hand. Please. He stopped. Belle took a breath. My mother asked me when I had ever chosen something, simply because I wanted it. Julian waited, and I couldn't remember. Belle smiled sadly. So I started thinking, about what? Home care. That's CareBridge. No, she shook her head. CareBridge begins after a hospital discharge. I want to work before the crisis. Julian's expression shifted from pain to attention. Belle continued, I want to build a caregiver support company for families before they're drowning. Scheduling, training, translation, respite coordination, not hospital software. Now he understood. You want your own company? Belle nodded. Yes. Julian was silent for several seconds. Then he asked, How long have you known? About 10 days. And you didn't tell me. I needed to know whether I still wanted it after the board crisis ended. He looked toward the window. What do you need from me? Belle almost laughed. Nothing. The word hung between them. For once, it did not feel cruel. It felt important. Julian nodded slowly. Okay? Belle watched him carefully. That's it? No. He looked at her again. There are about 50 things I want to say. Like, stay. Belle's chest tightened. But you said you don't need me. I don't, he swallowed. That's the problem. Belle's eyes filled. Julian continued. I want you here. There it was. Different words, different meaning. Belle looked down. Julian did not move closer. He did not ask her to reconsider. He did not offer more money. He did not offer equity. He did not use the company to keep her. Finally, he said, When do you leave? 6 weeks. He nodded. I'll make the transition work. Belle looked at him. Thank you. He gave a painful smile. You're welcome. She turned toward the door. Belle. She stopped. Julian's voice was quiet. I'm proud of you. That was when she cried. Not dramatically. Not collapsing. Just 2 tears she wiped away before opening the door. I hate you. I know. You're making this harder. I know. Belle left Latticecare 6 weeks later. Her last day was strangely ordinary. Meetings, transition documents, a farewell lunch, too much cake. Carlo came. Her mother came. Rachel sent flowers. Even Nina cried, although she denied it immediately. Julian stayed near the edge of the room. He did not make a speech about their history. He did not turn Belle's departure into his loss. When everybody else had gone, he handed her a small box. Belle looked suspicious. What is this? Open it. Inside was an old access badge. The photo showed Belle at 27. Her hair was shorter. Her expressions looked irritated. She laughed. My first badge. Julian nodded. You yelled at HR because your title was wrong. It was wrong. It said Operations Manager. I was Senior Operations Manager. You had been here 9 minutes. Standards matter. Julian smiled. Belle turned the badge over. Written on the back in black marker were 3 words. Builds something better. Belle looked at him. You wrote this? Today. Good. He laughed. She put the badge back in the box. Then silence came. Not awkward. Just full. Belle looked at him. We did a pretty good job. Yes, even if I didn't choose Seattle. Julian smiled faintly. You chose eventually. The company. Yourself. Belle felt that sentence settle somewhere deep. She hugged him. For the first time in 8 years, Julian's arms came around her. Neither held on too long. When they separated, he did not kiss her. Belle was grateful, not because she did not want him to, because she did, very much. And for once, wanting something did not mean she needed to take it immediately. 4 months later, Belle opened the first office of Buy-in Care Partners in Daly City. She chose the name carefully. Buy-on, community, home, people helping people. But she refused to build another company whose entire business model depended on one person sacrificing herself for everyone else. Her employees had real schedules. Care coordinators had backup coverage. Family caregivers received training before emergencies. People could ask questions in the language they understood best. Nobody had to prove love by becoming exhausted. Belle's mother became an unofficial quality control department. "This chair is terrible." "Mama, it's a waiting room chair. People waiting are still people." Belle replaced the chair. Carlo helped with technology. Nina sent 3 hospital contacts. Rachel connected Belle with a nonprofit elder care foundation. Julian did nothing, at least not without being asked. Belle noticed. That mattered. He sent one message on opening day. "Proud of you." No flowers, no investment proposal, no surprise appearance. Belle stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Thank you." 2 weeks later, she called him. Julian answered on the second ring. "Is everything okay?" Belle smiled. "See, that's your problem." "What?" "You assume I'm calling because something is wrong." A pause. "Fair. I'm calling because I have a question." "Okay. Are you free Friday?" Another pause. Longer. "Dinner." Julian said nothing. Belle started smiling. "Julian, I'm trying very hard not to answer too quickly." She laughed. "Why, personal growth. Very impressive." "Friday works. 7? "Yes. One condition. Anything." "You're not allowed to talk about lattice care for the first hour. That seems excessive." 75 minutes. 1 hour is reasonable." "Fine." Friday evening, Julian arrived at the restaurant 3 minutes early. Belle was already there. No assistants. No company phones on the table. No crisis. No board meeting afterward. For the first 20 minutes, they talked about almost nothing. Carlo's students, Lorna's opinions about office furniture, a documentary Julian had watched, a terrible meal Belle once cooked. It felt strange, then it felt good. At one point, Julian stopped speaking. Belle noticed. "What?" "Nothing." "You're staring." "I know. That's usually considered rude. I'm adjusting." "To what?" He smiled. "Being somewhere with you where neither of us is solving anything." Belle looked at him. There it was again. The thing both of them had spent years avoiding. Not crisis. Not usefulness. Presence. After dinner, they walked 2 blocks without deciding where they were going. At a corner, Julian stopped. "Can I ask you something?" Belle smiled. "You're very formal tonight." "I'm nervous." That surprised her. "You don't get nervous." "I do now." Belle waited. Julian looked at her. 4 months ago, you asked why you didn't choose me." Belle's face warmed. "I remember. I've thought about it. That sounds dangerous." "Probably." He smiled, then became serious. "I think I know the answer." Belle waited. "You weren't ready." She considered that, maybe. And neither was I. That surprised her more. Julian continued. "If you had chosen me at 24, I probably would have turned you into the same thing I turned Rachel into." Belle's smile disappeared. "The person waiting for me to arrive after everything else was done." He looked down. "I don't want to be that man again." Belle reached for his hand, not because he needed comfort, because she wanted to touch him. Julian looked at their hands, then back at her. Belle said, "I think I know my answer too." "To what?" "Why I didn't choose you." Julian waited. Belle smiled. "Because back then, I thought choosing someone meant proving how much I could sacrifice for them." Her fingers tightened around his. "And you didn't need saving." Julian gave a quiet laugh. "I was running a startup with 6 employees and negative cash flow. You definitely needed saving professionally." "Fair, but not from me." She took a breath. Daniel needed stability. My family needed help. My father needed care. Julian listened. I loved all of them. I know. But somewhere along the way, I learned to recognize need faster than desire. She looked directly at him. I'm trying to change that. Julian's voice softened. What do you want now? Belle looked at the man standing in front of her. Not her CEO. Not the billionaire founder from magazine covers. Not the newly divorced man sitting in her Honda. Just Julian. Imperfect. Learning. Available. Belle smiled. I want another dinner. His face changed. That's all, for now. Saturday? Too eager. Sunday? She laughed. Next Friday. That's 7 days. You survived divorce court? Barely. You can survive 7 days. He stepped slightly closer. Can I kiss you? Belle stared at him. 11 years ago, neither of them had asked the right question. 4 months ago, they had asked one at exactly the wrong time. Tonight, there was no emergency forcing an answer. No company depending on them. No marriage ending. No board waiting. Nobody needed anything. Belle rose onto her toes and kissed him. When they separated, Julian smiled. Belle pointed at him. Do not make that face. What face? The CEO face. I don't have a CEO face. You absolutely do. What does it look like? Like you think a negotiation just went your way. Julian laughed. This isn't a negotiation. Good. Belle took his hand again, because this time I'm not choosing you because you need me. Julian looked at her. And I'm not choosing you because I need you either. Belle raised an eyebrow. That sounded less romantic than you intended. He smiled. Let me try again. She waited. Julian squeezed her hand. I choose you, because when nothing is wrong, you're still the person I want beside me. Belle felt tears threaten. She shook her head. Better, thank you. Still needs work. I have time. That was the part Belle liked most. They had time. Months later, Lorna stood inside Buy-in Care Partners watching Julian assemble a bookshelf badly. Belle walked into the room and stopped. What is happening? Julian looked up from the floor. Your mother said she needed help. Lorna immediately interrupted. I said the shelf needed assembling. Belle crossed her arms. Those are different sentences. Julian looked at Lorna. She was very persuasive. Lorna nodded. He is learning. Belle laughed. Julian returned to the shelf. One side leaned visibly lower than the other. Belle stared. You run a multi-billion-dollar company. That has no relationship to furniture. You know there are instructions. I used them. Lorna whispered loudly to Belle. He did not. Julian looked offended. Belle sat on the floor beside him. Move. I can do it. I know. Then why are you taking the screwdriver? Belle smiled. Because I want to. Julian stopped. So did Lorna. Belle realized what she had said. Something small. Almost meaningless. Except it wasn't. For years, Belle had measured love by how much of herself she could spend, how many problems she could solve, how many people she could carry. Her father, her mother, her husband, her employees, her CEO. She had believed being indispensable was the same thing as being loved. It wasn't. And Julian had believed something similar. He had spent years becoming valuable enough that nobody could ignore him, then wondered why the people closest to him still felt alone. Neither of them had needed a perfect person. They had needed to stop hiding behind usefulness. The shelf eventually stood straight. Mostly, Lorna inspected it. Acceptable. Julian looked proud. Belle laughed. Her mother walked toward the kitchen. I made pancit. Julian immediately stood. Belle looked at him. You're abandoning your project? It passed inspection. Barely. He reached for her hand. Belle took it. Not because he was falling, not because she was rescuing him, not because either of them needed the other to survive what came next. She took his hand because she wanted to. And for Belle Santos, that simple choice had taken most of her life to learn. The day she picked Julian Hart up outside divorce court, she thought she had asked the most important question too late. Why didn't I choose you? Months later, she finally understood. The past did not need a different answer. They did, and this time, both of them were free enough to choose it.